Bass had not even been announced.
What do you think about the name, Bass Angler Sportsman Society? Well, I didn't really care for that, but I couldn't think of anything better.
That was the funniest thing you ever seen, to see Forrest be led off to jail.
Literally in a jailhouse. And we was in there, it seemed like 2 or 3 days.
In those days, we'd get a flat-bottom john boat and catch fish and pile them up in that john boat, just a big pile of dead fish.
The day after he won it, the Nashville Banner, the newspaper, had a streamer headline. It said, SOB wins Bass Classic.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the 1972 Bassmaster Classic.
1 year removed from the first Bassmaster Classic at Lake Mead, 1972's World Championship of Professional Bass Fishing would once again be decided on a mystery lake.
We gathered all of our fishermen in Memphis, Tennessee for our flight to the Mystery Lake. And boy, let me tell you one thing, it was one more big, continuous guessing game into where we were headed.
The tournaments were real unique from the standpoint you didn't know where you were going. You were going to a mystery lake.
Bobby Murray, you won the Classic last year. Let me ask you this question. You got it all figured out where we're headed this year?
I sure don't. I wish I knew.
Because they were just trying to keep it a mystery event where nobody would have any kind of advantage over anybody else.
A lot of folks love to start rumors now, and Ray, I think, planned a lot of those rumors.
Where do you think we're headed? Mexico.
Keeping the Classic location secret was critical for fair competition between the qualifiers, even if it meant going to extreme cases for qualifiers with unusual circumstances.
Forrest would, of course, qualify for this tournament.
It was kind of plowing new ground. Actually, there had been a Classic the year before, and I wasn't involved in that because we had a tragedy at our Ranger plant, and in fact, it had burned to the ground, and they had the Classic, first Classic without us, but we were there for the second one.
And there was another fellow who made the trailers for the boats. He was over in North Carolina. His name was Blake Honeycutt.
Ray Scott was terrified that we might somehow learn beforehand where the tournament would be.
And I knew darn well what would happen is that one of these guys trucking boats across country would find out where we're going and get on his phone and call Forrest Wood or Blake Honeycutt and whisper to him we're headed for Percy Priest, and he'd start looking for information, and it would spoil the secrecy of the fact.
And just to assure everybody that there was no hanky-panky going on, Ray, and I'm sure Bob helped, came up with the idea to have them locked up in the jail.
Literally in a jailhouse. And we was in there, it seemed like 2 or 3 days.
Monitored by the Memphis Police Department for 2 or 3 days before the Classic. Of course, that was just a publicity stunt.
That was the funniest thing you ever seen, to see Forrest be led off to jail.
We didn't let him out until we had him handcuffed, and it was just it was a show, you know.
We were releasing them for the first time in 3 days so they could enter the airplane and head for the Mystery Lake.
Everyone on the plane was heading for the Classic, wives, press, everybody. It was so much fun.
You know, once you get on an airplane, the excitement built, and then when Mr. Scott got up and told us where we were going, that was kind of like the climax of the whole deal.
So, folks, here we are with the second annual Bassmasters Classic. Today, we're headed for a destination I know all of you have been wondering about, but not known. Now, folks, we're headed north, actually northeast of Memphis. You can almost hear the guitars and the cowboys singing because we're headed for Nashville, Tennessee.
The plane took off like this, and then it went down. We went up from Memphis and landed in Nashville. We really blew the hat off on that one.
Ray had announced it after we got up, and we all thought, when they did that flyover, we all thought we were going to Old Hickory Reservoir, which is there on the Cumberland River.
Now, the lake that you're probably wondering about, there are several good lakes, and I know you want to know that Old Hickory is just north of town, but we're not going there. We're going to Percy Priest.
Never heard of that lake before. None of us knew about it. We thought it was right in the downtown city of Nashville, which it was pretty close.
Biggest shock I can remember. Who would come to Nashville, Tennessee, on a small lake like Percy Priest and fish the biggest tournament of the year?
One of the guys that qualified for that year's Classic was a guy by the name of Stan Sloan.
Stan Sloan's over here from Nashville. Where you think we're going, Stan? Far away.
Stan Sloan lived in Nashville. He was fishing the Classic. So we put Stan on an airplane, flew him to Memphis, loaded him on a charter plane, and flew him back to Nashville.
And when they told us in the airplane what lake we were going to, you could hear him groan all the way to the front of the plane.
Probably that's the biggest groan of anybody on the plane, because I despised it.
He said, nobody fishes that lake. He said, that's a horrible lake. We can't, no.
Anytime you got a big lake next to a big city, you've got a lot of problems.
Butler was always there. I mean, he was one of those guys that, one of those angels that quietly stood there in the shadows when I needed help. Boom, there he was.
The Chamber of Commerce people in Nashville made us feel as warmly welcome as we've ever felt before.
For years, we used to look at the Bass membership, and Nashville was the center of the Bass membership. It seemed to spread out from Nashville.
There was a tremendous amount of fans that showed up for that Classic. Tremendous amount of people. I remember my father and one of his buddies drove down just after it was announced.
The entertainment at a Classic was getting started about right then.
We went to Printer's Alley one night down there in the Grand Ole Opry.
We had a ball. They had us going here and there and yonder. It was really an ordeal because, you know, you'd stay up late at night till might get in bed at 11 or 12 o'clock, and then you was up at 4. And
4:30 comes mighty early for our tires went to Fishman, and each morning they gathered here in the lobby of the Hilton Airport Inn, making themselves ready with that first cup of coffee and the bus ride out to the Four Corners Marina on Percy Priest.
By 1972, the Bass Angler Sportsman Society was poised to take professional bass fishing down a road of unrivaled success. But just a few years earlier, when Ray Scott was getting started, he needed the help of a few good men who shared his vision. Men like Don Butler.
Butler was always there. I mean, he was one of those guys that, one of those angels that quietly stood there in the shadows when I needed help. Boom, there he was.
When Ray was trying to put these events together at the very beginning, he migrated to Don over there in Tulsa and told Don what he was trying to do.
Bass had not even been announced. I'm thinking I got to try to sell people $10 memberships. And I happened to be in Tulsa.
We're driving down 31st Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he said, what do you think about the name Bass Angler Sportsman Society? Well, I didn't really care for that, but I couldn't think of anything better, so I said, yeah, I think it'll work.
He said, what's the membership going to cost? I said, $10. Hoping he'd say, here's 10. He said, what's a life membership? I said, a life membership?
And without blurting, he said, a lifetime membership's $100.
Boom, laid the big 100 on me. I like to have a heart attack. When I was so excited, I stopped at a dime store to pick up a little package of receipts, paper receipts. And so I wrote Don T. Butler, first member of B.A.S.S., and put the date on it, $100 life membership.
I carried it in my billfold for, Lord, I don't know how many years, and he called me one day, and he said, do you still have that receipt?
He gave me that receipt. I've got it framed on my wall. Really historic note.
Don Butler, he was a tremendous promoter of bass. He helped kickstart bass.
Don Butler literally almost lifted Ray up when Ray really needed some financial support.
Ray had worked hard, but he had a run of bad luck.
It was practically a hand-to-mouth operation. He was, as he admits, he was about broke most of the time. And Butler called. He normally called about once a week from Tulsa to Montgomery to see how Ray was doing.
He told me, he said, I think I'm going to shut it down. He said, it's just not working. And I said, sure, it's working. You know it's working. Stay with it.
But I said, you know, I've got to get this membership up, and I'm trying to do direct mail, some big mailings.
He went to the bank, but the bank said, under these circumstances, we can't take a chance on it. So he said, thank you. And then he went to the post office and wanted to get an advance on some postage.
From Tulsa, he's laughing. He said, man, that's a monopoly. You don't get the credit for one postage stamp with them. Then it was kind of a joke. We passed it off. We talked about the weather and fishing and whatever.
And later that day, Ray got a call from Western Union and said, you've got some money here.
I said, well, fine. Sure, it's an entry fee for one of the tournaments. And so at lunch, I went by the Western Union, walked in expecting to get a check for $150. And the lady said, you got to take this draft to the bank to get it. I said, you're broke? She said, well, I'm not broke, but I said, we don't have $10,000. Man, 10 grand. I said, what's this?
He said, who sent this? And the guy looked and he said, I don't know. It's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. No note, no IOU.
I knew Don Butler. Boom, 10 grand. Man, I went down and got that. Told the postman to kiss my butt. And we licked for a week.
2 or 3 months later that the mailing had paid off and Butler had been paid back.
Well, that got him started. That was just a boost. That's what friends are for, and he certainly ended up being a good friend.
Catch and release was a kind of a shock to fishermen who had been normally hanging their fish on a rope, making pictures with them, bringing them to the weigh-in like that.
I've probably killed thousands and thousands and thousands of fish that I regret today. I regret it deeply. It just took somebody to say, hey guys, let's stop killing the fish, and we did it, and I'm so glad that we did.
The 1972 Bassmaster Classic was the first world championship to practice the new Don't Kill Your Catch program, a campaign that quickly changed the mindset of sportsmen everywhere.
Catch and release is a story in itself. We had received a little publicity, bad publicity from a few guys. I guess they had nothing better to write about.
We were catching a lot of bass. There's some tournaments where we catch a ton of bass a day.
We were in Jackson, Mississippi, I believe, and a local man there standing, and him and I were visiting, and he said, y'all are killing all the fish in our lake. And I said, well, I agree with you, because we got that boat filled up, and I don't remember how many thousands of pounds we weighed in that particular tournament.
It wasn't totally the tournament fisherman's fault, because in those days, the bass or the fisheries biologist would tell you that sport fishing could not harm a body of water.
Well, the sport was becoming so popular. Hey, all of a sudden we can put pressure on fish in these reservoirs with a rod and reel.
In those days, we'd get a flat-bottom John boat, put some ice in it, and catch fish and pile them up in that John boat, just a big pile of dead fish.
Of course, there was nothing illegal about it, because they bought a license, and the license said you could keep 10 fish or whatever the limit might have been.
What most people don't know is all those fish that we did catch and brought to the weigh-in that never made it back to the lake went to orphanages. They always went to very needy causes.
Nevertheless, I acknowledge, and I think most people, that it was a terribly rough scene to see a John boat full of dying, flopping fish.
And everybody knew something had to be done about that, because we were getting bad publicity and deserved bad publicity for it.
The solution came from trout fishermen who were already practicing catch and release. At the start of the 1972 season, Ray Scott made his plea.
And I simply asked the fishermen, I said, look, guys, I wrote them a letter, but I said, look, try your best to keep these fish alive. And the guys, to show you what a tremendous group of men we had, they took it heat. I said, look, there's no penalty, there's no reward. But try to bring them in on stringers or keep them in coolers or whatever. Just do your best.
Catch and release was a kind of a shock to fishermen who had been normally hanging their fish on a rope, making pictures with them, bringing them to the weigh-in like that.
It was tough. But I was very pleased at the enthusiasm for that. They understood. Nobody complained about it. They just did their best. So after that was over, we started preparing for the second tournament. I told them, I said, you've done so well that I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to give you, because you tried so hard, I'm going to give you 1 ounce bonus for every live fish you bring in.
Keeping them alive meant money. And when you tell a fisherman If you can keep them alive, you're gonna make more money. They're gonna do it.
Keep in mind, there were no live wells. The boats in those days didn't have, had storage boxes, but no live wells.
They had coolers with aerators in it or styrofoam boxes or ways to keep the fish alive. It was up to the fishermen to keep those fish alive.
And I'd put an old rough rudimentary pump in there where it's just some lake water was just pumping in and out of the thing.
I even rigged up a live well like a whiskey still, running through a copper tubing through ice to keep it. I never lost fish.
So we demonstrated that just in a crude live well, that we could hold these fish alive.
Don Butler again got a patent on the first ever functional live well for a boat.
The aerated live well was one of the best innovations in fishing, you know.
Don Butler and Harold Sharp had got together and created the Okie Bug aerator live well system built in an igloo cooler.
Harold Sharp came up with a system, said, I'll give it to you if you want to do it.
Said, do you mind if I exploit your idea? And I said, no, I hope you make $1 million on it.
Harold didn't care about a patent, and Butler didn't either. I don't know why he got a patent. He wanted the fishermen to have it available.
I got a patent attorney that's not worth a nickel. First time I try to exercise the patent, I find out it's not any good, so I did start building the first live well aerators. The credit goes to Harold Sharp, and neither one of us made a nickel on it.
Catch and release is probably the most important ethic to come out of fishing.
Catch and release and Ray's promotion of that made it a model for local fishing clubs and just for individuals too, to say, hey, look, I can have the joy of catching these fish. I don't have to put them all in the skillet to have a fun day.
The don't kill your catch became the cry of bass fishermen. And it is truly, if there's a legacy from Ray Scott and B.A.S.S., it's the recycling of the future of fishing and the release of bass.
And Ricky walked up to me and said, well, you're 2 pounds ahead. I'm gonna catch a 2-pounder the first cast, and then it'll be a horse race. And I said, be my guest.
They're all in for the first day, and our leader, Ricky Green from Arkadelphia, Arkansas, brought in 10 bass, all alive, weighed a total of 15 pounds and 12 ounces.
First day I go out there and I catch 15.5 pounds. Well, the closest competitor to me was 7 pounds, so I had an 8-pound lead over everybody. And one of my best friends back then on the tournament circuit was Don Butler.
First day of the tournament, I caught probably 30 bass and had all of them at the time in my live well. And when I got through culling, I had 2 fish.
I felt so sorry for him. And I told him, I said, now, Don, I'm fishing from this point to that point in this area, throwing a spinnerbait, my favorite, and catching them up in the flat, shallow water. It was like in October. So what he did, he went up about a mile from where I was fishing, went back in behind Fate Sanders Marina. I'll never forget it. And that day, he came in with 20 pounds.
We got 20 pounds and 4 ounces, ladies and gentlemen. That's the new leader. Let's give it out there.
It was a tournament where the guy was in the right spot at the right time.
Don was fishing behind Fate Sanders' boat dock. And how he stumbled on the hole, I really don't know.
The reason I went back there, I had absolutely nothing going. And I told my partner, I said, sit down and let's go for a boat ride. And I saw there was a cove there. It had a narrow opening going into it and probably a mile long.
It looked like a nothing, flat bank type cove. But something told him, he said, turn in here.
And lo and behold, when I got back there were 6 Christmas trees in the water. And I told my outdoor rider, I said, sit down, son, we're going to catch us some fish here, because that's the kind of fishing I'm used to.
The scoreboard, of course, indicates that we have a new leader, Don Butler of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who came in with a tremendous bunch of fish, 20 pounds and 14 ounces to be exact, moving him up to a total of 23 pounds and 13 ounces, and just a pound and 13 ounces above yesterday's leader, Ricky Green.
We're right there tight with each other. I said, Don, I can't believe you did that. You caught 22, I think it was. And he said, well, I caught them right up here. If you need to catch any, you can come on up there and help me.
I did a smart thing the second day. I told the fishermen in the tournament exactly where I was fishing, how I was fishing.
Back then, there was such a camaraderie. If you found some fish and you didn't want anybody in there around you, all you had to do is tell everybody where you was fishing.
Just an unwritten rule. It's not a law. It's not a rule that is enforceable. I knew where Don Butler was fishing. I knew exactly the cove he was fishing in. But yet, we didn't go in there.
And most of the guys would even know where it was. They'd go around it. They wouldn't even run over it. And it was a lot more respect.
The next day dawned, and it was Saturday. But when we got ready to leave, the darndest thunderstorm came up you ever saw.
The last day was terrible. It rained like the devil. It was pouring water out of a tennis shoe.
I thought I had a chance, especially with the weather conditions. I thought there might be more of my fish in that area to come up and turn on.
And Ricky walked up to me and said, well, you're 2 pounds ahead. I'm going to catch a 2-pounder the first cast, and then it'll be a horse race.
I told him I had one out there by a stump that weighed about 5 pounds, and that'd get us even or a little ahead, maybe.
And I said, be my guest.
I think that was a mental thing I was trying to do to him.
The rain stopped. They shot the gun. We took off, and it was about a 25, 30-minute boat ride up there.
Well, old Don Butler is out in front by a measly 1 pound and 13 ounces. He's ahead of Ricky Green, who is really breathing on his neck.
It just didn't happen for me. It just wasn't meant to be, I guess. He didn't hurt his fish, and he had a broader area than I did. So I had a 150-yard stretch of bank. He had a whole big bay back there with stick-ups and all kind of good cover in it.
Pulled in, the first bush I hit had a bass on it. The second one had a bass on it. They all had bass on them.
There's not a finer guy in the world to win it than Don Butler. He was just, Don's a principal guy. And I was tickled to death that if I couldn't win it, I'm glad he won it.
I think it's very fitting that he should win this classic, most prestigious of all fishing tournaments. It's a pleasure to call him out here now to accept this trophy and this check for $10,000 cash. It goes to a man who deserves it beyond any stretch of your imagination. Don Butler of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Butler killed them all. He the SOB took care of.
And of course, that made his SOB, the small oaky bug, famous.
The SOB was a spinnerbait called the small oaky bug.
It was a quarter ounce spinnerbait that he had designed.
He was a heck of a lure designer, and he built a bait called the oaky bug spinnerbait.
And it wasn't a bad name. Oaky bug wasn't a bad name.
Let me go back and give credit where credit's due. Well, I came in from fishing one time. My daughter was there. She said, so what'd you catch him on? I said, that little bait there. She said, what's it called? I said, it doesn't have a name. She said, I got a name. I said, what is it? She said, oaky bug. So that's how the name oaky bug came about.
And the day after he won it, the Nashville Banner newspaper had a streamer headline. It said, SOB wins Bass Classic. And Butler was famous again.
This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports.